Max Mara Spring 2026 Runway Luxury Minimalist Fashion Trends You'll Love. Introduction: the quiet power of Max Mara's Spring 2026 vision. Welcome to Timeless Chic Studio, where I explore fashion that feels elegant, wearable, and deeply inspiring beyond the runway itself. Today, I want to talk about the Spring 2026 runway from Max Mara. And honestly, I think this collection quietly delivered one of the most sophisticated statements of the season. At first glance, the designs looked restrained and minimal. But the more I studied the silhouettes and styling choices, the more I realized how intentional every detail truly was. What I find interesting is how this collection proves that minimalism does not have to feel cold or boring to feel luxurious. Instead, it can feel emotional, intelligent, and surprisingly powerful when handled with confidence. The return of effortless luxury. I think one of the strongest messages from this runway was the return of effortless luxury instead of loud fashion theatrics. In my experience, many collections try too hard to impress viewers with dramatic shapes or overwhelming embellishment, but Max Mara seemed completely unafraid of simplicity. The soft tailoring, fluid fabrics, and neutral palette created a sense of calm that immediately stood out among trend-heavy collections this season. What surprised me most was how understated pieces somehow looked richer than outfits overloaded with decoration. Unlike most people who associate luxury with excess, I believe true luxury often comes from restraint and precision. Why neutral colors felt so modern. The color palette immediately caught my attention because it stayed deeply rooted in creams, sand, camel, soft gray, and muted earth tones. I think these shades worked beautifully because they allowed the tailoring and texture to become the center of attention instead of competing with bright color stories. In my experience, neutral dressing can sometimes feel repetitive if the proportions are weak, but this collection avoided that completely through layering and movement. What I find interesting is how the monochromatic looks actually felt fresher than many colorful collections shown this year. Would these outfits have felt as sophisticated in louder tones, or is quiet color part of the magic itself? Tailoring that felt relaxed instead of rigid. One thing I truly appreciated was how the tailoring looked soft and relaxed rather than overly structured. I think fashion has been moving away from stiff power dressing for years, But Max Mara refined this evolution in a way that still looked polished and commanding. The blazers draped naturally over the body, trousers flowed effortlessly, and coats moved with elegance instead of stiffness. In my experience, relaxed tailoring is much harder to execute successfully because it can quickly appear sloppy if the proportions are not carefully balanced. What surprised me here was how even oversized silhouettes still looked incredibly sharp and feminine. The beauty of clothing that moves. As I watched the runway, I kept noticing how beautifully the garments moved with every step. I think movement is one of the most underrated aspects of fashion because photographs alone rarely capture how clothing truly feels in real life. The fabrics floated gently without appearing fragile, which created a sense of quiet confidence rather than dramatic performance. What I find interesting is that the collection felt luxurious partly because nothing looked forced or uncomfortable. Unlike trend-driven fashion that prioritizes spectacle over wearability, these pieces looked designed for women who actually live active, sophisticated lives. Minimalism that still feels emotional. I believe one of the biggest misconceptions about minimalist fashion is that it lacks emotion or personality. This runway completely challenged that idea for me because every outfit seemed to express a mood through texture, silhouette, and styling choices rather than obvious decoration. In my experience, emotional fashion does not always require bold prints or bright colors to make an impact. Sometimes the feeling comes from how clothing makes someone carry themselves with calm confidence and ease. What surprised me most was how comforting many of these looks felt despite their refined elegance. The unexpected strength of softness. What I find fascinating is how softness became a form of strength throughout this collection. Fashion often presents power through aggressive shapes, sharp shoulders, or dramatic styling, but Max Mara approached strength differently this season. I think the soft draping and fluid fabrics suggested confidence without needing to appear intimidating. In my experience, women today are increasingly drawn toward clothing that empowers them quietly rather than demanding attention from everyone around them. Unlike the exaggerated power dressing trends we sometimes see on social media, this approach felt far more modern and sustainable emotionally. layering that looked effortless. The layering throughout the runway looked incredibly refined, yet it never appeared complicated or heavy. I think this is where Max Mara truly excels because the styling feels intelligent without becoming inaccessible for everyday women. Long coats over flowing separates, lightweight knits paired with tailored trousers, and tonal combinations created depth without visual chaos. What I find interesting is how even multiple layers still looked breathable and relaxed for spring dressing. In my experience, the best styling often feels accidental, even when it is meticulously planned behind the scenes. Why these looks feel timeless. As I watched the collection, I kept thinking about how timeless many of these outfits will remain years from now. I think timelessness comes from proportion, quality, and confidence, rather than chasing whatever trend dominates social media for one season. Unlike ultra-trendy runway moments that feel outdated within months, these looks already seem destined to age beautifully. What surprised me is that timeless fashion no longer feels conservative or predictable the way it once did. Instead, it feels modern precisely because it avoids desperation for attention. The quiet influence of Italian elegance. There was something undeniably Italian about the energy of this collection, even beyond the tailoring itself. I think Italian fashion often succeeds because it understands how elegance should feel lived in rather than overly perfected. In my experience, some luxury brands become so polished that they lose warmth and humanity, but Max Mara maintained both sophistication and approachability. What I find interesting is how the runway styling suggested confidence without appearing overly styled or artificial. That balance is incredibly difficult to achieve in contemporary luxury fashion. The role of confidence in minimalist dressing. I believe minimalist fashion only truly works when it is supported by confidence and self-awareness. These outfits did not rely on flashy details to create impact because the silhouettes themselves communicated assurance and maturity. In my experience, people sometimes underestimate how powerful simplicity can look when worn with intention. What surprised me most was how commanding even the most understated looks appeared on the runway. Would these outfits feel as captivating without the calm confidence they projected so naturally? Accessories that enhanced rather than dominated. Another detail I appreciated was the restrained use of accessories throughout the collection. I think modern styling often becomes overcrowded with statement bags, oversized jewelry, and excessive layering that distracts from the clothing itself. Here, the accessories complemented the outfits instead of competing for attention, which made the entire runway feel more elevated. What I find interesting is that this restraint actually made every accessory appear more luxurious and intentional. In my experience, when everything screams for attention, nothing truly feels special anymore. The sophistication of monochrome styling. The monochrome looks were probably some of my favorite moments from the runway because they demonstrated how powerful tonal dressing can be. I think wearing variations of the same color creates a visual harmony that instantly feels polished and expensive. In my experience, monochrome styling also allows texture and silhouette to become far more noticeable, which is exactly what made these looks so memorable. What surprised me was how warm and inviting the neutral combinations still felt despite their simplicity. Unlike harsh minimalist aesthetics that can feel sterile, these outfits felt deeply human and wearable. Why wearability matters more than ever. One thing I respect deeply about this collection is that it felt wearable without sacrificing elegance. I think audiences are increasingly tired of runway fashion that looks impossible to translate into real life. In my experience, the most influential collections are often the ones that inspire people to rethink their wardrobes, realistically, instead of fantasizing about unattainable styling. What I find interesting is how Max Mara managed to make practical clothing feel aspirational and luxurious at the same time. That balance is far rarer than many people realize. A refreshing alternative to trend fatigue. Fashion today moves incredibly fast, and I think many people are experiencing genuine trend fatigue because of constant micro-trends online. This collection felt refreshing precisely because it ignored that pressure completely and focused on longevity instead. Unlike viral fashion moments designed mainly for social media engagement, these looks seemed intended for women building lasting personal style. In my experience, collections that resist trend obsession often become the most influential over time. What surprised me most was how calming this runway felt compared to the overwhelming energy dominating much of fashion right now. The feminine energy behind the collection. Although the collection embraced minimalism, I never felt that it lost femininity or softness. I think there is a misconception that strong dressing must reject feminine energy to feel modern or powerful. Here, the fluid tailoring, graceful movement, and gentle palette created a version of femininity that felt intelligent and self-assured rather than performative. What I find interesting is how subtle details created emotional warmth without relying on romantic cliches. In my experience, that kind of quiet femininity often feels far more empowering than exaggerated glamour. Why mature style lovers will appreciate this runway. I believe this runway especially resonates with women who value sophistication over fleeting trends. In my experience, mature style lovers often prioritize quality, comfort, versatility, and emotional confidence rather than dramatic fashion statements. Max Mara understood that perfectly by offering looks that felt refined without trying to appear youthful or overly experimental. What surprised me was how modern the collection still felt despite its timeless foundation. Unlike fashion that chases youth obsessively, this runway celebrated elegance at every stage of life. Fashion that encourages intentional living. As I reflected on the collection afterward, I realized it represented more than clothing alone. I think the runway subtly encouraged a slower, more intentional way of dressing and living overall. In my experience, fashion becomes most meaningful when it supports a lifestyle rather than simply creating visual spectacle. What I find interesting is how these looks suggested clarity, calmness, and confidence in a world constantly pushing excess and noise. That emotional resonance is part of what made the collection feel memorable to me. The lasting impact of quiet luxury. Quiet luxury has become an overused phrase recently, but I think this runway reminded me what the concept actually means when executed authentically. It is not simply about expensive basics or muted colors, but about thoughtful design, emotional restraint, and timeless sophistication. In my experience, authentic quiet luxury feels deeply personal rather than performative, and Max Mara captured that beautifully this season. What surprised me most was how emotionally impactful such restrained fashion could feel. Sometimes the softest voice in the room leaves the strongest impression. Conclusion: why this collection will stay in my mind. As I look back on the Max Mara Spring 2026 runway, I honestly think it delivered one of the clearest visions of modern elegance we have seen in a long time. The collection reminded me that fashion does not need to be loud, chaotic, or trend-obsessed to feel powerful and inspiring. In my experience, the most memorable style moments are often the quietest ones because they stay relevant emotionally long after trends disappear. What do you think about this new direction in luxury minimalism? And could you see yourself wearing these timeless looks in everyday life? If you enjoyed this conversation, subscribe to Timeless Chic Studio for more elegant fashion insights, runway analysis, and timeless style inspiration.